Really think is important is for people to hear preachers who come at the text from a different place than they do. Because we, as much as we try to avoid it, we all bring our assumptions, and we can only bring our perspective. And that's where the great benefit comes from other people's perspective who are different from us.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Rick Jordan, President of Great Bible Teachers. Welcome to the video series from Great Bible Teachers. Today's interviewee is Brian McLaren. Brian McLaren started his career as an English professor, and then he became pastor of a church. He pastored for 24 years. He now serves full-time as a speaker and a writer. We met at a writers' conference, actually, in Princeton at the Divinity School there, where he was a keynote speaker. And he was gracious enough to give me some time, and we sat outside at Princeton, beautiful summer day, and had opportunity to talk to one another. To stay informed about other speakers, other interviews that I'll be doing, then sign up for our email newsletter list and subscribe to this channel. And now, here is Brian McLaren.
Hi, this is Rick Jordan, and I'm here today with Brian McLaren. And Brian McLaren has written a lot of books, has a lot of good insight for us in the church, and I'm just really glad he's able to talk to us about faith and leadership, including people who have shaped his own faith. So, Brian, we have our group is Great Bible Teachers.
Yes.
So, in your spiritual pilgrimage, who has been influential to your faith?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a church context where we were all about the Bible.
Yeah.
But I realized at a relatively young age that I kept hearing the same sermon again and again and again. You know, there's the read your Bible more sermon, and you know, the accept Christ before it's too late sermon, and Jesus coming soon sermon. And it was like there was a half dozen sermons, and whatever Bible passage they used, it ended up just being this verse leads to that sermon. And I remember being a little depressed thinking, gosh, isn't there more to learn? So I've always appreciated it when there were Bible teachers who took me to new places. And one of the first was a great Bible scholar named Walter Brueggemann. And Walter specializes in the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament. And so he was the first who when I first started being exposed to his books about the Bible, and then I heard him speak, I felt like he was taking me deep into the Bible and helping me see the social and political and economic and cultural and historical context and see the dynamics that was going on in the Bible. You know, years after that, I remember I heard for the first time a woman named Joanne Badley, a Baptist from Canada. And when she taught the Bible, I remember thinking, as a woman, she sees things. Almost all my Bible teachers had been men. But when she read the text from a woman's perspective, she just noticed things that I never paid attention to before. And I was so grateful for that. And then one step beyond that, when I started being exposed to Black and brown and Asian Bible readers and Bible teachers, I realized that as a white person, I'd been trained to see certain things because I was only taught by white people.
Right.
But when I saw people who experienced the other side of racial discrimination, I learned so much. Today, preachers like Reverend Jackie Lewis from Middle Church in New York City, or Reverend Otis Moss III from Trinity Church in Chicago, when they grapple with the text, they notice things and they see things that are really there that I never saw. So those would be some. There have been so many others too.
Right. And even those, now, we may not have the opportunity to go to those churches and hear those people, but Walter Brueggemann has written a lot of books.
That's right.
And others have written resources that we can go to and say, oh, this is from a woman's perspective. Or
that's exactly right. And in fact, in today's world, you can go on YouTube and hear amazing preachers from around the world, you know. But what I really think is important is for people to hear preachers who come at the text from a different place than they do. Because as much as we try to avoid it, we all bring our assumptions, and we can only bring our perspective. And that's where the great benefit comes from other people's perspective who are different from us. You know?
Yeah. So you travel widely. You go to a lot of different churches, a lot of different denominations, a lot of places, I guess, around the world, actually. What do you see happening in the Christian world, the Christian faith, and particularly as it comes to educating people and nurturing their faith, that gives you some hope or gives you fear or whatever you would want to
So
say?
let me kind of answer both of those, hope and concern, in the same way.
Okay.
It's not our fault, but we got born at a time when a lot's going on. And the way that I say it is, I think we have 4 great crises facing us. Crisis of the planet. We're sucking more resources out of the planet and pumping more toxins into the planet than the planet can handle. Second is the crisis of poverty. Fewer and fewer people own a bigger and bigger percentage of the wealth of the world, and more people are being sort of left at the bottom of the pyramid, so to speak. Third is the crisis of peace, that when you have those first 2 problems, there's stress, and more people want more and more weapons, including nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. And when you get more and more angry people with more and more weapons, we got trouble. And then the fourth is planet, poverty, peace, and people, that vulnerable people suffer the most. If you're a minority, religious, racial minority, you suffer the most. And people who are sick, people with chronic illness, whether mental or physical, people who are born with different abilities, right? Vulnerable people. What concerns me is that many people read the Bible as if it were about escaping this earth and going to heaven, rather than helping us address the planet, poverty, peace, and people. What encourages me is more and more people are realizing that the message of the Bible is not primarily an evacuation plan, but it's a transformation plan. How do we join God in God's healing work in this world, in God's saving work in this world? And wherever that's happening, I think it's so exciting and so positive.
Yeah, and that could happen in a small group on a Tuesday night, or a Sunday morning Bible study, or something like that, if a leader were sensitive to doing.
Exactly right. If a leader pays attention to what's actually in the text and is willing to ask some questions and learn from some people from different perspectives, I think it even happens better in a class. I'll tell you why. In most of our churches, a sermon is a monologue. And something we know about adult education, if anyone who's done research in adult education knows that adults learn more when they're speaking than when they're listening, more when they're conversing than when they're listening to a monologue, and even more when they're doing and grappling with something. Well, that happens so well in classes, and in small groups, where, for example, you engage with a text, and you say, so let's say you engage with a text in Genesis that says God put Adam and Eve in the earth to care for and protect, to tend and protect the earth. And then so at the end of that class, you discuss it, everybody interacts, everybody's talking, so everybody's learning. And then you say, so let's all of us make a commitment, something we'll do in the next week to care for the earth. And so somebody says, well, I'm going to be careful to use less electricity. And somebody else says, well, I'm going to plant my garden. And somebody else says, well, I'm going to try to recycle more of my paper and plastic, whatever it is. And then they come back the next week and they talk about it. Everybody is learning in a way that brings change to their life, not that brings that brings notes on a piece of paper, right?
Right.
It's not just on the paper, it's in your life that the real learning is shown.
And you've mentioned these 4 things, but I know you also have a real burden, concern about what's going on with Christians who are supporting a white supremacist type of agenda. Could you address that?
Sure. This is a big deal for me because I was asked to be present in Charlottesville, Virginia with the big Unite the Right rally in 2017. I'm 62 years old. I never thought in my lifetime I would see Americans walking down the street carrying Nazi flags, chanting Nazi slogans, chanting slogans about white people enslaving black people. I mean, I just was shocked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Horrible things being said about women. I mean, just awful. And what is even more disturbing to me is that people use the Bible to justify these things. The thing we have to face is, for most of our history, people abused the Bible to justify slavery, to justify segregation, to justify treating women like dirt. You know, women didn't even have the right to vote through most of our history.
Yeah.
So what I really feel passionate about is, if people are going to abuse the Bible in these harmful ways, we had better get on the right side of history and the right side of the Spirit of God's work in this world. And we ought to start using the Bible for the right purposes.
Yeah.
And that's going to mean we're going to have to grow up in our way of reading the Bible.
Right.
Because the fact is, you can find verses from the Bible and use them to justify genocide, horrible things. And if we don't learn how to stop using the Bible that way and use the Bible in more constructive and healing ways, people will have every right to say, I don't want to read the Bible, it's a dangerous book, it's a hateful book. Well, it's up to us to make sure that we start using the Bible in a constructive way. You know, anybody who owns guns knows that if you have children around and you leave a loaded gun around, that's malpractice. You're asking for horrible trouble. Well, some people, their Bible doesn't have a safety on it, and it can be picked up and used to harm people.
Yeah.
So we have to teach people how to use the Bible in a healing way. It's what Jesus did. Like when Jesus said, you know, he's speaking to the scribes and Pharisees, and, you know, you use the Bible to tie up burdens and put them on people's backs. He says, you know, the Sabbath, human beings weren't made for the Sabbath is made for human beings. He's trying to teach people how to stop using the Bible to burden people down and oppress them, but rather to set them free.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Brian McLaren. I think there were several takeaways that could help shape us as Bible teachers. One is, listen to people from different perspectives than ours, different ethnicities, different economic strata, different nationalities. They have different perspectives on the scripture than we often have as white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, many of us who are in this Bible teaching that we do. So listen to other people. Another is the 4 crises that he talks about. The crises of the planet, poverty, peace, and people. How are we addressing those issues, these crises, in our Bible studies? And then the other is the warning not to use the Bible to burden people down, the warning not to use the Bible as a weapon. Their Bible doesn't have a safety on it. Great line. What was the takeaway for you? Who are you using to help you understand the Bible in different ways? How are you addressing these crises? And what cautions do you use to prevent you from using the Bible or allowing others to use the Bible as a burden rather than the release, liberation that Jesus offers us? Thank you again for joining this interview. Join us for future interviews. Sign up for the email list at greatbibleteachers.com and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get informed about future interviews. Thank you again for joining us. Continue to speak the truth in love.